Hello, and welcome to Queering Arthur, a podcast where you can join us in exploring queer interpretations of Arthurian legend. I'm Dr. Schuyler Rad.
And I'm Kelly O'Clair.
Today, we're introducing the podcast to you for your edification and enjoyment. Thanks for listening. Kelly, I have a problem.
Yeah?
I ship Merlin and Arthur. I tried to do some research on this idea of an intimate relationship between Merlin and Arthur, but my internet search returned only like 12 or 11 results. What am I gonna do?
You might be using the wrong internet.
Well, I put the search in quotes and it was very limited. And I did find fan fiction and communities for the Merthership. But it got me thinking, as a social sciences scholar and lover of fantastic quests, and as a queer and neurodiverse person, the phrase, I ship Merlin and Arthur, or vice versa, means to me that Arthurian legend is queer. But how can we know that's true? That's kind of the idea of social sciences, is trying to answer the question, how do we know it's true? So I'm asking, is Arthurian legend queer? That's my research question.
This is perfect. I love talking about fan fiction and queer readings of things.
So why should people trust us in the first place? Well, I have a PhD in research methods, so I've written a methodology to answer that research question. I care about queer lives and interpretations. I'm open to new experiences. I'm conscientious and care about other people. I like to debate new ideas. I'm a little bit neurotic, though, which is kind of the details with the methodology and stuff. It can have its advantages, but I have been told I'm a little bit pedantic. How about you, Kelly?
Well, I have a literature degree focusing on feminist readings, and I work in a library. I also care about queer lives. I've been told that I'm open and conscientious. I have anxiety. And because I'm a Leo, I'm obligated to tell you that I'm a Leo.
Yeah, you're a Leo. I see your necklace is... What is it?
It's a resin cast of a lion claw.
That's really cool.
Thanks.
And you were wearing some sort of jacket today, too.
Oh, yeah. It's a Lion King jacket.
Yeah. Lion King. That's so cool. I don't really get into astrology, but I think it means something to people.
Like for me, getting to say, I'm the lion one, is that sort of thing.
Rawr.
Yeah. And then I think it's one of those things for me, it helps sometimes with making myself feel more confident. I'm an anxious person, and so sometimes it's nice to think, well, but I'm a lion. I can do this.
My wife mentioned the rising sun, and she's like, you need to know the exact minute you were born. So I looked at my birth certificate, but it doesn't have a time on there, so I guess I'll never know my rising sun.
I actually just looked at my chart today because I wasn't sure what my moon sign was. It's a Scorpio.
What does that mean?
I don't fully know yet.
That's really important to answering a research question, is being able to reflect on where the researcher comes from. Where do I come from? What is my context? It's something that changes how I will answer this research question. I talked a little bit about my background as a research methodologist and the method I'm using for this podcast. It's based in hermeneutic. Hermeneutic is Greek for interpretation. How I think of hermeneutics is like a globe starting in outer space and zooming in. And that's a metaphor I'm going to use a lot in this podcast. If any listeners have seen the trailer on YouTube, you saw the characters in a space station orbiting Earth. Starting from a high-level cultural view and zooming in from the culture to the author and then to the text, and then applying the queer lens to the text. The actual doing of this hermeneutic is what I call the basorexia authenticity method. BAM. Bam. So, basorexia. It's from a French root word for to kiss, bisou. Basorexia means an overwhelming urge to kiss. Basorexia is like that urge is sometimes like an ooh la la feeling with that Frenchness, desire or pleasure. But sometimes it's more disturbing. It triggers internalized homophobia. I'm familiar with both those feelings. Growing up in Texas in a conservative family, I recognized the urge to kiss someone of the same sex, and I felt bewildered. But later I realized the urge to kiss someone of the same sex is not just normal, it should be celebrated. The basorexia authenticity method, BAM, it has 4 steps. 1, basorexia. That's the reading of this utterance. An utterance is an unbroken string of text. So step 1, basorexia, reading the utterance and recognizing that queer urge. Step 2, that's where a lot of the detail is, because I'm a methodology nerd. I have a lot of detail in there, and we can talk more about that in like a members only episode or something. But it's pretty much comes down to dissecting the text and then erecting a queer construct from those dissected bits. Also, the things that make it legitimate science, which, according to Karl Popper, include replicability and falsifiability. Step 3 is the authenticity, is where we talk about the results, sometimes called triangulation and qualitative research methods. And step 4, step 1, basorexia, step 2, science, step 3, authenticity, step 4, profit. What do you do, Kelly? It's probably not as pedantic as mine.
So I was a literature student and have a BA in literature. And I focused a lot on feminist theory in literature and eventually moved on to using that also in pop culture, using feminist theory to critique characters in, say, the Batman franchise. And literary criticism often works as a conversation written as informed essays. You can use the text to back up your statements or to argue against someone else's. When interacting with different texts or anything, people like to make fun of English teachers because they'll, laugh about, they think they're like overanalyzing everything, and people will make the joke of like, oh, they say the curtains are blue and that means that they're sad. But in fandom spaces, people do that, and it's very funny going from being a literature student to watching people do this online and not realizing that it's the same sort of thing. People will analyze every word, every image. If you watch fan videos, it's like, oh, their hands were close together. That goes back to it doesn't mean it's wrong, someone's interpretation. For example, I am a huge fan of the series Hellsing, the anime and manga series, and there's a scene that in one translation says one thing and in another it says another thing, and I don't speak Japanese, so I have no idea. I have to rely on other people for that, but I recently have started buying the newest translation, and I had told someone like, oh, I need it for reasons because it has a different translation, and they literally said, are they ship reasons? And I said, yes. So, it's just those little things that could mean nothing or could mean something. I think in even things like this, it's, you both have to take the context of like how you're reading it, your perspective, and also the context in which it was written and who wrote it, and which is very similar to what you're talking about, right? Is like going deep into it, but you're also talking about like a wider look at things. I just feel like the literature student in me is very much like, okay, what do the words say? What is the context in which it was written? And some of the history and stuff, but I feel like a lot of literature students aren't necessarily also history students. I was, but that's not the point. So it's just harder, I think, to be like, well, in the time, because you may or may not know the context of that. You just use all of that information and using what you do know and the literal text to write your essays and debate each other. So I'm actually kind of looking forward to, like, we might end up at different conclusions depending on the text. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that conversation really is what I'm super excited about. I like debating people. But like you said, the English teachers, they're really getting into that, and the fandoms are doing that. That's just literature criticism and literature analysis, and that's kind of what we're doing here. So podcasts are the future. Podcasts are a possible future of academic discourse. There's a lot of legitimately well-done academic level work being done in podcasting, and they've been an inspiration to me. Really, it was the podcast Queer as Fact with Alice, Eli, and Irene that really inspired me, and the British History podcast from Jamie Jeffers. Those were really motivating to start this podcast, kind of the intersection of British history and Queer as Fact. I listened to Mike Duncan's Revolutions podcast, not the History of Rome, but the Revolutions podcast was really great. That was some serious academic work. And there's the Bad Gays podcast, started listening to recently with Hugh Lemmy and Ben Miller, and One from the Vaults by Morgan and Page, and there's Out of the Fridge with Allison Poppy and Andrew Chard, and oh, Kelly, that's you! The podcast you did a few years ago. Yeah, Kelly, you're an inspiration. One thing that I really liked with Mike Duncan's podcast, he's always taking listener feedback, and at the beginning of the episode, correcting himself, taking listener feedback seriously. We're not playing fast and loose with facts here. Yeah, we are using a queer lens to interpret text, which is highly subjective, although we have a replicable and falsifiable methodology. But we're going to make mistakes, so you, listener, if you catch something, please get in touch. We've got an email, we've got social media, and we like the discourse. Getting involved in that discourse is really critical thinking. So one important part of this podcast is that it is for mature audiences. Not only because we'll discuss mature themes, but also because we want to ensure listeners have a mature understanding of respect for different perspectives, setting boundaries for self-awareness, and for self-discovery.
We embrace fear and think critically to challenge ourselves, promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. Trigger warnings will be listed at the beginning of each episode so you can ensure your well-being. We're going to be using Richard White's edited volume of Arthurian legend. It's divided into 7 parts with almost 100 chapters, and each chapter is a text from 500 to 1400 CE.
And there's also the internet. Have you heard about that one? It's a pretty helpful source. There's a lot on the internets that we'll be able to use. But the academic literature that I'd like to use, for example, there was one on hermeneutics that I really wanted to read, but it was $34.99. That academic literature is totally inaccessible to independent scholars like us. But I do have some sources from when I was in grad school, like Sedgwick's works on queer theory. There was one I really liked, is Ghaziani and Brim's Queer Methods. And like you said, the Richard White text, which you introduced me to.
Oh, yeah. on accident. We're hoping to be bi-weekly, which will mean 26 episodes in the first year. That'll actually get us through the early Arthurian works and Monmouth and the Brute Chronicle.
Yeah, Monmouth's Historia Regnum Britanniae. Mm-hmm. The HRB for those in the know. I stole that joke from Dorsey Armstrong. She's got the great courses.
Oh, yeah.
For King Arthur. She's a Arthurian scholar.
I almost took that home recently from the library.
Yeah, I have a couple copies that we're going to give away at the launch party. So.
Ooh.
And speaking of the membership stuff, there's a community. We're going to try to form a virtual Camelot, or is that kind of dumb?
Our virtual roundtable.
Yes, I love it. A virtual roundtable with the Facebook and the twitter.com and the email queeringarthurpodcast@gmail.com.
And we're hoping to have lots of fun stuff on our TikTok and YouTube.
And there's an Instagram, and like good millennials, we'll have a Patreon, which right now it's starting with a $1 tier, and you can be one of the Queering Arthur retainers, the queer retinue. You'll get a shout out, early access to exclusive merch, and access to the community Discord server, which I'm really excited about.
And we want to have a lot more membership benefits as we grow. We're hoping that we'll be able to do exclusive stickers, art done by me, and that you'll get to vote on designs for merch.
Arthurian art. Mm-hmm. Arthuriana.
Perfect.
If you haven't seen Kelly's art, check it out. It's on Instagram. She's very talented.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we want to have some member-only events and voting for those as well, like more content about methodology, live streams, including maybe video games and tabletop games, readings, reenactments, radio plays, posters, comics, and expanding our sources like Arthuriana in modern books, movies, shows, comics, for example, Tennyson and Eliot, and Foreman Excalibur, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, you knew that was coming, Disney's Gargoyles, Hellboy, Divine Gate, and more.
And more! Arthuriana truly spans the world and time, and we're gonna queer it all.
Gotta queer them all.
To queer them is the real test. I'm really excited, about the Discord server, and if you get on the Discord server, you'll be the first to hear about a special project that members will get to be involved in, so I hope that everyone savors their desire to hear the announcement while I dance with temptation to reveal it.
Wanting to listen, you can listen on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, Stitcher, Podchaser, Overcast, and many more.
And if you're listening to this trailer before June 2024, come to our launch party. Check out more on our social media channels.
We really want to thank our friends and family for supporting us on this wild endeavor. Special thank you to Andrew Chard for providing us with recording equipment.
This podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Squaxin Island tribe and Nisqually Indian tribe, land sold to the U.S. government under duress in the Treaty of Medicine Creek during the Puget Sound War of 1855 to 1856. Now, you know a bit about how we will do things in this podcast. Let me leave you with this. How do you interpret an authentic queer narrative? Stay chivalrous, queerthers. Can we do that? Can we make up our own fandom name? Queerthers for Queering Arthur fans? Yeah. Okay. Stay chivalrous, queerthers.